Hey guys, we get to another episode of When the Scriptures Become Real. It's kind of podcast we learn, what we study, what we grow. We try to become the best versions of ourselves as we can as we continue to serve our Lord. Can you guys find the podcast on YouTube or anywhere else you get your podcast? We're just so thankful you guys are here, that you guys have found us, and that you guys are with us today. All right, guys, I am so excited to finally begin our Esther series. We've had great feedback on this from the prequel and even before that. So now we're finally here as we get to study Esther. And I'm so excited. I think what this is going to be, to be honest with you, it's probably going to be about 5 to 6 parts. So we're going to take our time, right? We're going to take our time and we're really going to try to paint this picture and let the Bible show a visual picture of this beautiful, beautiful book. So I literally cannot wait as we study this and as we dive into this. Now, I mentioned this, but I want to mention it again. Before you listen to this one, go back to the last podcast that we did, and it's called the Esther prequel. What that will do, that'll give you some historical pictures so that you could understand what's happening before we dive into chapter 1, okay? So make sure you go back and listen to the prequel. Pause this one, right? We're not going anywhere. Pause this one, go back to that one, and then we'll be here for part 1, okay? So you'll understand a little bit more because I don't want you to be lost as we're studying this. So as we're diving into this, guys, I cannot wait to study this with you. Your guys' feedback on character studies is so great. You know, you guys study in group studies, maybe as individual studies. I've seen notes from people. Let's continue to do that and build this community as we study together, all right? So as we're getting prepped, as you guys are getting ready to study, you got your pen, paper, I got my iPad, got my pen out, ready to go. Here's where we want to start our conversation before we dive right into the text together, back into this time. Here's the question that we want to start with. How could God let that happen? You ever ask yourself that question before? How could God let that happen? How could God be okay with this? How could God let this happen now? You ever ask those questions to yourself before? You ever hear someone else as they're talking to you and then they ask that question? How could he do that? Then ultimately, the question flips, and now the question is this: is God really in control? Is God really in control? You know, you think about the things that you see in this world. You think about the things that people have seen in their own little worlds. Is God really in control of all this? Because it's confusing. Because on the one hand, you hear about God and you hear about his mercy. You hear about his justice. You hear about his love. You hear about his kindness. You hear about all those things about his heart. But on the same time, how could a being be this? And how could a being also just sit here and know for a fact that these things are continuously happening in this world? That for a fact that these things are continuously happening in your little world, and he does nothing? How can the same being exist? How could someone show and give all of his heart and pursue me with everything that he has? John chapter 3, verse 16, for God so loved. How could he be that same God, but still at the same time just watch you, literally watch you suffer? How can that same being exist? So then the conversation and the feeling evolves. So now the feeling is, well, it seems like God is a God for these, but God's not a God for us. God is a God for my friend. God is not the same God for me. God is a God for this. God is not that God for me. So then now the conversation begins to go inward, and now you view yourself as somebody that God can't help because there's been situations where he could have done something. He could have intervened. He could have taken something away. He could have added, but he didn't do it for you. Is he in control? So now we have to ask ourselves this question, guys. What's our definition of control? Right? What's our definition of control, right? You ever hear people use that in a sentence, right? Do you have control over things at work? Do you have control over your kids? Do you have control over your wife? Do you have control over your husband? Do you have control over the people at church? Do you have control over this? Right? We literally ask the question to people. And it's a genuine question. Hey, are you in control of this? Are you in control of this situation? We ask that question. So, what is our definition of control? Do you have the ability in said situations? Do you have the ability to, at any moment in time, that if you don't personally like something, that you can manipulate the situation to such a point that you can control it and you take power? That's what we really mean when we ask those questions. Do we have control over those things? Do you have enough cachet? Do you have enough pull? Do you have enough authority to say what you need to say? And even in some situations, sadly, we could take scripture and we could say, well, do you have enough control to make people do what you want them to do? Unfortunately, that's what happens. Do you have control? So then we see, if that's our human definition, and then we look at God of how he's allowing things in this world. We look at God, how he's allowing things in your little world and the things that you see and other people see. God, you say you have control. You say you're the God of this world. You say you created everything. Job said you add and take away. All these things that we know about you. But why aren't you doing anything? So I guess you're not in control like you say you are. Is God really in control over all this? You know, the thing about control, we talked about this and we hinted at this, which go back and listen to this series. That was a fun one too. The Jonathan, A Friend Like Jonathan series. We really spent pretty much one episode talking about Saul. And here's the thing, and we have to ask ourselves this question honestly. Don't think about anybody else. Think about you as an individual, right? Sometimes what we do is when lessons are taught, when the Bible is preached, when the Bible is discussed, we try to take a principle that kind of gives us a light bulb in our head, and then we use that light bulb that we're learning as ammunition to go teach somebody else. Well, why don't you do that for you first? Why don't you do that for yourself first? So now, think about this for both of us as we're studying. When we talk about Saul, Saul was a man who always wanted control over situations. I like David right now. I hate David right now. I love my son Jonathan right now. I hate my son Jonathan right now. I love my daughter Michael, but I'm going to use her as a pawn in this situation. I love Israel. I hate Israel. It's their fault. So Samuel, or not Samuel, Saul, why was Saul in every situation? Why was Saul always trying to have control over everybody and every situation he came in contact with every day? Why was Saul trying to have control? Because Saul was fearful. He was scared. You know the reason why you want control over everything in your life? You know the reason why you want everybody to do what you want them to do when you say it? You know why the reason why you get so frustrated all the time? You know why the reason why you cannot have peace or contentment is because you're scared. And the more control you try to have over people around you, the more fearful that shows me that you are. You're scared of something. You're just trying to control the situation. You know what the book of Esther is going to teach us? The word God, the name of God, Yahweh, it's not physically written in the book of Esther at all. You can double check, right? Double check. Look at all those chapters. The name of God is physically not in the book, but his footprint is there. His handprint is there. His impression is there. You know, as we're going to study this, here's a lesson. The closer that you get to Christ, the closer that you get to God, the more you realize the control that I'm trying to have in the house, the control I'm trying to have at the church, the control I'm trying to have with people, it doesn't matter who they are, the control you're trying to have, God is trying to teach us to let go of control. His ways are always higher than ours. And sometimes we put our human definition of control on God. So then when God doesn't act at the church like we want him to, when God doesn't act in the world like we want him to, when God doesn't act in the home like we want him to, when God doesn't act individually like we want him to, then because God, you don't have control and I know you do, then I'll take it. I'll squeeze everything that I want out of everybody. I'll do that. You see what's happening here? Is that us? Is that us? Is that you? The book of Esther, yes, Esther plays a huge part on this stage. There's no doubt that Esther plays a huge part. But the book of Esther and every book in the Bible, it reveals God. And God is going to show us, even though it feels like I'm sitting on a throne, it's like this image. Even though it feels like I'm sitting on a throne and I'm just watching this happen, I'm just okay with it. I'm so nonchalant with the world today. I'm just so nonchalant about the church today. I'm just so nonchalant about your life. I just sit here and watch it. That's the type of God I am. I'm the God that just sits here and I just want to watch you suffer. That's not our God. And it's very easy to feel like that's who he is. Because why? Because you're quiet. Why? Because you're not doing anything, or you don't do things in my time. We learn to lose control when we get close to God. That's what we're learning. Okay. So this is where we're going. Okay. So let's dive into the text and we're going to learn more about God through Esther here. Let's dive in verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This was Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. Okay. Verse 2. In those days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the citadel, that in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him. Now, here's what's interesting. This is why we brought up the control thing, because remember, God's people were in captivity. Now, as we talked about in the prequel, right, they were released, right, by King Cyrus, which was prophesied 150 years that Isaiah prophesied about. I will use Cyrus as my shepherd. Now, we talked about reasons why some Jews would be here in Persia. Some would be here because their hearts were so hard that God didn't do anything before. God wasn't in control like we thought he was. So we're going to abandon him. That's why some stayed. Some also stayed because of age and they couldn't make that 900-mile walk back to Jerusalem. So some stayed because of age and maybe disability. So that's why we have pockets of Jews here in the book of Esther. So now what the book is doing, the book is showing us how powerful this kingdom was of Medo-Persia, which was prophesied in Daniel chapter 2. But this power of Medo-Persia, which took over Babylon, it was so vast. It had over 127 provinces. And notice how big it told us it was. From India to Ethiopia. Okay. So if you look at a map and if you just put like in Google, if you put Medo-Persia from India to Ethiopia map, it'll show you the Persian Empire. So basically it'll be highlighted maybe in green or maybe be highlighted in like a pink or maroon color. And it'll just say Persian Empire. And literally anything above the Indian Ocean and to the left of that is all them. They literally took over. This is, and think about it from a person who is a follower of God. What are we supposed to do? We're so small in comparison to how vast they're getting. I mean, we thought Babylon was something. These guys took them over and now they're going next level. And what's interesting from Daniel chapter 2 is it seems like as God's people are seeing the landscape of the world at this time, they're seeing that nation after nation that is against God is literally getting bigger and bigger and more violent every time. So it's like the one nation that takes over the next one is worse than the one before. So now, man, is God really in control here? Is God in control? So it's showing us what is happening, right? So then verse 2, when the king sat on the throne, which was in Shushan, which was in the citadel. Now, here's what's interesting about Shushan. That place is actually the same as Susa. Now, what's interesting about this palace and this citadel, remember who else was in Susa? Go back to the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah chapter 1. He was in Susa. So it's interesting that Nehemiah was in the palace, and now Esther later is going to find herself in the palace too. Very, very cool background information there. So then in the third year, he made a feast for all his officials and servants, right? So as he makes that feast, he makes the feast for all these. In verse 4, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. I want you to think about how insane that is. We're talking 180 days. This is literally 6 months of everybody from those 127 provinces coming together and banqueting and just going crazy. Now, for sake of just so you could get a visual picture, it kind of fits. But when you think about it, remember in Aladdin, right? When Aladdin wished to be a prince, and then they take him down and they sing Prince Ali, right? And as they're singing that, it's a big parade. It's literally in Persia, the movie is. But think about that setting and 6 months of a giant parade. You know, you think about like the Macy's Day Parade, right? You just see how insane that is and how the production is. Imagine the Macy's Days Parade happening for 6 months, every day. Every day. Now, what are we talking? What's happening during these 6 months? We're talking there's banquets, there's an insane amount of excess drinking. We're talking about explicit, like super, super explicit things happening. And it's interesting. There's archaeologists that they've dug up things from that area in Medo-Persia, and they've actually found artifacts of things from King Ahasuerus, and they found artifacts that said King Ahasuerus, and his nickname was the Great King. Why? Because from India to Ethiopia, he had over 120 provinces. So this was 120 provinces filled with different people. So imagine you have one man who is just in ultimate control. That's why he was called, he's the great one. He's the great king. So what he's doing here in verse 4, if you're that great king, you're going to show off everything that you have. You're showing off all your women. You're showing off all of your gold. And we'll get into that. You're showing off all of your bounty that you have. You show off literally all of the slaves that you conquered. Anything that you could show off to show that you were in, what's our word? To show that you were in control, you're going to show that. And guess what? I got 6 months. I got 6 months to show you everything I got. Isn't that interesting? We're already seeing hints of someone who wants to be in complete control. And we're seeing hints of somebody who has overtaken so many things and is the world power at this time. And he believes, I have control. I have control. Now, verse 5. In those days, when those days were completed, so now after the 100 or 180 day banquet, right, for 6 months, after all this stuff is happening, now notice what happens. The king made a feast lasting for 7 days, right, for all people who were present at Shushan, the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. So now there was a second group of people that came in. Now, what's interesting, the second group of people that came in, this was just for people in Shushan. Now, remember, what was it before? Before, it was everybody, right? It was all 127 provinces. Now, it's just the people in Shushan. So now it's a great banquet, and this lasts for 7 days, okay? So now watch the detail, right? Watch how he tries to show things. Verse 6, there were white and blue linen curtain fastened cords of fine linen. There was purple on silver rods. There were marble pillars. The couches, think about that for a second. The couches were of gold. Imagine going home. I can't imagine going to my apartment and my whole floor is straight up marble and my couch is gold. Like, why would you even want to sit on a gold couch? What are you trying to show? I'm trying to show that this is probably not good use, but guess what? I got it. I'm in control here, right? Now keep going. The couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of alabaster turquoise. Oh, now we're getting into some colors here. Turquoise, right? White and black marble. So now what did they do at this second feast? They served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from another one. So wait, there were some vessels that were gold, but then there were some that was just so different. So now think about this. Now, and I mentioned this, and just a quick side note, I mentioned this as we were beginning to study this, that just because the book says Esther, sometimes a lot of guys, we check out. Oh, well, that's a ladies' class book. Oh, yeah, that's a book for my wife. Oh, that's a book for my daughters. Oh, that's a book for the lady. Like, I'm not going to. Did you know that the first two chapters is just on us? Let's just be honest. The first two chapters is on us. So now think about this. This is a lesson for us guys. Guys, what do we want to do? And we're going to get into this, especially in a second. Guys, when we show that we have power over a situation, what do? We overcompensate. So we want to show you, I want you to know that I'm in control, and I want you to know that I'm in control here. So sometimes you overcompensate by what you say. Sometimes you overcompensate by what you try to do. Sometimes you overcompensate by what you try to obtain. See, here's the thing, guys. Sometimes some people do this, and that's not them. And sometimes as guys, what we can do is within your families, well, I got to feel like I have control. So now I got to get mad to show that I'm in control here. That's not you. Like, people know that's not you. Why? Because that's not what you do. Well, when I'm here, I'm trying to take control and I'm trying to be the leader. So I'm trying to be more vocal. That's not you. You're trying to overcompensate. You see what I mean? So sometimes what we do, guys, in our own pride, we will overcompensate to try to show other people I'm in control, and I want you to know I'm in control. And this is an image of what God is not. And this is an image of what a husband shouldn't be and what a man shouldn't be. I'm not trying to do something to overcompensate to try to prove to the church, to try to prove to my wife and to my kids, to try to prove that I'm this guy. I don't have to do that. If I follow God, and if I follow his principles, and if I teach those things, then it's known. I don't have to overcompensate that. And I don't have to be somebody that I'm not. You understand what I'm saying, fellas? This is important. So what this king is doing, what's he doing? He already showed us he's in control. He's got a gold couch, guys. Come on now. That's only something we would do. He's got a gold couch, right? He's got marble floors. What's he trying to do? I'm in control here, and I want everybody that I know from India to Ethiopia, I want them to know I'm in control, and I'm going to have a second banquet so everybody in Susa knows I'm in control too. So look at what he's doing, fellas. This is his style of leadership. His style of leadership is, I want to put on a face. I want to put on a voice. I want to put on an action that I'm in control in this situation. This always leads to destruction. We're going to see that later. Verse 8. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory. For so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to every man's pleasure. To do what y'all want to do. Have as much as you want to have as least as what you want to have. But you're in control too, guys. So you see what he's doing? He's trying to have control and then teach all the men there in Susa, you've got control too, fellas. Do what you want to do. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that the same mantra that we have? Do what you want to do. We'll get to that later. Verse 9. Queen Vashti, now his wife, right, also made a feast for the women in a royal palace, which belonged to the king Ahasuerus. Isn't it interesting? It the Bible just throws that in there, right? It's almost like a husband and a wife have a house, and then it's like, well, the wife is there, but at the same time, it's not her house, it's my house. So now, isn't it interesting that the Bible throws in Queen Vashti held a feast and a banquet which belonged to the king. So what was his thing? I want control, and I want to show you I got it. Now, guys can have this, but ladies, you can have it too. I want control. I want control. Things are mine. I'm in control. You see what's happening? And this mindset just creeps in, and we don't even know it's there. The mindset creeps in. Verse 10. On the seventh day, when he heard of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, that guy's huge. Circle or highlight that. The first guy, Mehuman, he is huge. Circle or highlight him because we're going to get to him. Mahuman, Bithna, Harbana, Bigtha, Agbatha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of the king. So, again, we're adults here, so we have to understand why this is important. If you're banqueting for 180 days, if you have this other banquet for 7 days, you're going to have not only your daughters, you're going to have other women, you're going to have other men's daughters, you're going to have just women in general everywhere. So if you want control over these women, if you want control over quote unquote yours, right? If you want control, you're going to have all these guys around. You need servants. So what they would do in normal palaces, and we see this going all the way back to the book of Daniel when the Jews were taken, they would take men and they would castrate them, right? So now they could still have strength, but they would obviously lose a lot of that testosterone, and they couldn't physically do anything with any of these women. So they were eunuchs. And when you look back at the text, it looks like Daniel was too. So now you have all these eunuchs. Now, here's an interesting thing about Persian kings. Persian kings were they really love 2 things. They love cleanliness, and that's going to matter once we get to chapter 2, right? So they believed, and this even goes back to the idea that the Egyptians had. They wanted to be so clean all the time that they felt like any public river, we cannot contaminate that. So what we have to do is we have to have baths and we have to have pools to where we can purify ourselves and we can clean ourselves. So they wanted to be extremely, extremely clean, right? And that goes all the way back to those Egyptians, right? They had the same attitude. Second thing, Persian kings many times didn't want to be seen. So here's why this is so important. Isn't it interesting that all of chapter 1 up to this point, it had to go into insane detail? It even went to insane detail about the cups they were drinking, guys. So think about this. Persian kings didn't want to be seen because they felt like if the people see me too much, then therefore I lose my authority. So then what they would do, what the king is doing in verse 10, and this is why he names these guys, all 7, because he said, you guys have authority to do what I want you to do, right? Because the king, he would be hidden away. If I show my face too much, if I'm too involved, if I'm there, then the people will lose respect for me. Isn't that interesting? That's what we think too. For some reason, we want so much control. We want so much self-respect, which really, when you really boil it down to it, any way you look at it, it boils down to pride. That's what it is. But we mask it as almost kind of like, we mask it as being a leader, but it's really not. It's really pride. But sometimes what we do is we do the same thing. Well, I can't show my face too much. I can't be too involved. I can't do that because if I do that, then people will lose respect for me. Even just by saying that, think about what we're saying. Even just by saying that, what does it show is our motivation? Control. When you think about Jesus, what did Jesus come to do? Obviously come to seek and save the lost, but according to Philippians chapter 2, what was he? Jesus was a servant. Let me ask you something. Was Jesus only serving when he was preaching? The Bible clearly shows that that's a no. So what if Jesus had the mindset that some preachers and some of us have today and some leaders, Well, what if he had the same mindset that we have? I can't show my face too much, only when I'm in front of everybody. But I'm not going to do any serving. You're not going to see me on my knees. You're not going to see me doing this. You're not going to see me at a wedding enjoying time with people. You're just not going to, because if people see me too much, they're going to lose respect. Think about what we're saying. And here's why Jesus is so pivotal. And this is why Jesus changed things. When you look at Jewish rabbis, what they would do, and I'll show you this list probably in the next couple episodes. There's a list of what Jewish teachers couldn't do. And the list was this. Jewish teachers, whenever you would teach, people literally had to bow to you. Like as you're talking, you had to be in a humble state, bowed and listening. Jewish teachers, it was not copacetic. It was not good for you to eat with your students. It was not good for you to enjoy time with your students. These are rules. These are literal Jewish rules. But what did Jesus do? Jesus, being a rabbi, what did he say? Don't call yourselves that. Don't call yourself masters. Jesus was on his knees. Well, that's different. Jesus, aren't you afraid you're going to lose respect of the people? Aren't you afraid that people aren't gonna listen to your authority? It's not about me. So if we're asking the question, I'm too afraid that people are going to lose respect for me, you want control. You want control. And Jesus didn't want that. So the question is, why do you want it? Interesting, isn't it? Now, as we go on, notice what happens. So the king is separating himself, but he gives authority to people, to the eunuchs in verse 10. Look, I'm giving you authority. You could come in, you can go out, you could serve, you could do this, what I say, but I have to name you one by one because I'm going to have myself locked away because I can't spend too much time with the people. I can't do it because if I do, and if I show that I'm a human, then what they're going to do, they're going to lose respect for me. Now, verse 11, what did he command those people to do? I want you to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was very beautiful to behold. Now, what's very interesting about this, again, we're adults here. There's different ways that this can be interpreted. Now, again, I'm not saying this is it or not, but I'm trying to just paint a picture so you can understand. So some say that the queen, either way, let me preface it by saying this. Either way, it's bad, but it's just different how it's seen. So some say the queen was supposed to come out with absolutely nothing on. Some say the queen was to come out with something on and then undress. Some say the queen was only to come out with her crown. That's it. So either way, all three scenarios aren't good. But either way, this is not something that should be done, right? So now, I want you to imagine, when you think about this, fellas, too, this is very, very important and you understand why, guys, I said the first 2 chapters is about us. It's about us trying to have too much control, listening to other people that are saying you need control, trying to hide yourself away and not really be involved as a servant because you're too afraid or what other people say you should do. Well, if you do this and the people are not going to listen to you and have respect for you. It's all pride. That's all it is. You could disguise all of that as, well, people you need to be a leader. You need to be, yeah, I do. I'm trying to lead like Jesus. Now, how American leaders led is different. How cultural leaders led is different. But who am I supposed to be following? Them or Jesus? Have we really made a choice yet? And you can't mix them. So am I going to be like that? Or am I going to be like Jesus? Now, what's interesting about this, what have we been talking about since the very beginning? One word, and what was that word? Control. Here's a lesson, fellas. that's very, very important here. Remember in Ephesians chapter 5, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church. We're going to see that here in the book of Esther and the Persian male society, what they wanted, they physically use this word submission and domination. What they wanted was complete and utter and ultimate control. That's the Persian way. That's what they wanted. Now, what did the queen do in verse 11 or verse 12? But Queen Vashti refused to come to the king's command brought by the eunuchs. Therefore, the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. This is very interesting. Guys, when you think about control, next time, I want you to try this. I want you to go up to a buddy of yours or to a friend of yours or to a family that you know that hunts, right? Hunts whatever. And I want you to ask them, tell me a hunting story. Or go to their house and look at what they got. Hey, how'd you get that deer? How'd you get that whatever? And when you hear them tell that story, it's very interesting that it's always a battle, isn't it? I saw it up there. I had my red light on him. I was up here for a while. He tricked me. He got away from me, but this time I got him. Or maybe it's full on. The beast was coming towards me. The bear was coming, literally bear, moose, whatever. It was coming towards me, and I saw it, and I wasn't going to budge, and he wasn't going to beat me. And then I got him. And then isn't it interesting that every hunter, now I'm not saying this is sin, but it's not sin at all. But I'm getting to an idea, okay? I'm going to make that very clear, right? I'm going to speak slow because people will take things to the extreme. It's not wrong to hunt, okay? But I'm just going to an idea. Isn't it interesting that after every hunter kills something, what do? They take a picture of it. And then not only do they take a picture of it, then they mount it. Why? I want to show, as a male, I want to show that a thing that has so much power, I defeated it. And then now, not only did I defeat it, the next step, I want to display it. Guys, what we can do to our wives, what we can do to the women in our lives, what you could do to women in general. It's interesting that some guys that are just straight up dogs, what will they say? It's time to go hunting. And then you find somebody, you get a girl, and now what she becomes to you is not a precious ruby from God. What she becomes to you is not somebody that God has brought as a helpmeet to fight for you and to be there and to help you. She's not that anymore. What have you made her? You've made her something to display. What is that a symptom of? That's a symptom of a man that always wants control. So what's Ahasuerus doing? I'm not even going to call for my wife myself. Hey, you guys, y'all go get her and bring her to me. Bring my prize. Fellas, the women in our lives or that will be in our lives, they are not a prize for you. They are a gift from God. Women are not a prize for you. They are a gift from God. And so what Ahasuerus is showing us from a male perspective, everything I've ever done, the banquets, the control, the second banquet, the golden couches, the vessels, the marble floors, the power that I have, staying away from everybody so I don't lose control and authority, and calling my wife, calling my prize in to display her. That's a man, right? That's a guy. That's a guy that just has complete control. Now, let me make something clear. Fellas, we must make decisions and we must lead. There's no doubt about that. And you will never not hear me say that. But we are not tyrants to display. We are not that. And if you are that, you might want to change that up. You might want to change that up because that's actually not a man. That's a coward. And that's not who God calls us to be. This guy, he has a bunch of stuff, doesn't he? There's no doubt. But is this a man of God? This is a coward here. And God shows that this is not the right type of man. And what did the queen do? The queen said no. And from the lady's perspective, when you see a guy like that tries to overcompensate for what he's not, that tries to be a guy that he's not, that tries to have this persona of a man that he's not, guess what you need to do, ladies? You're not the right one. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to be rude. I'm sorry. You're not for me. I'm sorry. Refuse. Because if you get into a union with somebody like that, you're under his control. And time again, we see that in scripture. We see that with the woman at the well, right? We see that in some ways, we saw that with Naomi. But I don't want to see my Christian sisters in these situations. I want to see you in situations thriving with good men. Yeah, he might not be in control like this guy here. He might not have a bunch of possessions. He might not be the richest guy on the planet. He might not look the best. He might not have this giant stature. He may not be head over heels above everybody. But that's not what defines what a man is. What defines what a man is how he treats the gifts that God gives him. The man himself is a gift from God. His wife is a gift from God. His children are a gift from God. And the people that he leads at the church, the people that he leads in life, they're a gift from God too. That is a real man. This guy here, this is a boy displaying his toys. Don't be another toy. Okay? It's very, very important. I want to mention that. Verse 13. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times. Now, this was very interesting. This goes all the way back to all the kings from 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, even 1st, 2nd Samuel, right? So all the kings had an advisor. So what this means here, the king said to the wise men who understood the times is not necessarily what's happening right now. The times here is referencing older advisors that had seen other stuff that happened to other kings. Okay. So this is almost like a grandfather, like a great grandfather talking to like a great grandson, right? So I've seen the times, right? So therefore, based on the times, this is how you should respond to said situation. Now, is there some wisdom in that? There's no doubt. But sometimes godly wisdom is not within our times. But sometimes, well, it happened here and it happened here. Sometimes godly wisdom is not in that, but wisdom is in that. So we have to be wise to find it. Does that make sense? So now, a man that understood the times, this was the king's manner towards all who knew law and all who knew justice. Okay. So this is very, very, very important. So now as we understand this a little bit more, he's listening to these advisors. Now, remember when Rehoboam, when he became king and he listened to his friends, what should I do? What should I do to the people? Oh man, you should treat them heavy-handed. You should be like a scorpion. What you need to be doing is you need to be taxing them more. You need to show that you're a guy. You need to show that you have authority. That's how you lead. Man, yeah, that's how you lead. Then he went to the old man. Hey, what do you think I should do? You should treat the people well. You should listen to them. You should tax them less. Your hand shouldn't be as heavy as your father's hand was. No, I'm listening to these young guys. I'm listening to the guys I grew up with. So then he does what they say, and the kingdom splits. And what's interesting is those who advise Rehoboam, where are they at? And here's what's important, guys. And I want to make this very, very clear, and I'm going to speak very slow when I make this. When you take advice from friends, when you take advice from family, when you take advice from brethren, take advice humbly, right? So obviously people want to help, and that's good, right? So you should never try to say, well, no, they just don't want to help. Sometimes they don't, but you take advice. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. But just know that the decisions that you make, even those that give you good or bad advice, they don't have to live with the good or bad consequences. You do. So as king, as Rehoboam, I'm listening to my friends. I do what they say. Now I have to have a consequence, but they don't. I'm in a different position than them. I have different responsibilities than them. So now I take more hits than they have to. See, sometimes when people give you advice, oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to be rude, but you take it and you go to God. You go to God. Okay. That's very, very important. Very, very, very important. Okay. Verse 14. Now, and those closest to him, Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Maris, Marcina. What now? This is an important guy. Mamukin, right? Circle that in verse 14. Mamukin, that guy right there, he's gonna cause a lot of issues. Mamukin, the 7 princes of Persian Media, who had access to the king's presence. Now, we saw this before, so remember the 7 eunuchs that he mentioned. When I name them off, they have access to me. So then the king says, my advisors, I have to name them off because they have access to me, which proves our point that the king, in order to feel like I have authority, I have to be hidden away from the people, right? So now he literally has to name you to say, oh yeah, you can come in here. But the rest of the people, no, they stay out. Yeah, you come in. So this is what's happening. This proves our point. So then verse 15. I love it. Verse 15. So the king is mad that Vashti didn't come in. What are we going to do to Queen Vashti? So notice the king doesn't even ask this question. Who asked the question? The 7 people that are closest to him. Yo, what are we going to do about this? Isn't it interesting that your problems sometimes become we? Or someone else's problems become we? Hey, what are we going to do about this? What do you mean we? What are you talking about we? So it's very it's very interesting. What are we going to do? So what does this prove? This proves that the male-dominated mindset, the control mindset, everybody had it, not just the king. Everybody had it. So now, what are we going to do about this, guys? We can't let this slide, right? People think it's going to be sweet out here, right? We can't let this slide. What are we going to do? What shall we do, Queen Vashti, according to the law? Because she did not obey the command of the king brought to her by the eunuchs. And Mamukin answered before the king. Now remember, keep that guy in mind, Mamukin. Mamukin answered before the king and the princes, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also us. Did she though? But what did they do? They took it personally. No, you just didn't wrong us. You wronged all of us. You just messed up everything. You wronged all of us. And all the people who are in the provinces, not only us, you mocked everybody from India to Ethiopia. Now, I want you to keep this in mind because this is interesting about Mamukin. It's very possible that Mamukin, why did he speak up? It's very possible that he had trouble in his house and he had a personal vendetta against Queen Vashti. So think about how this benefits him. I'm having trouble, again, in this male-dominated control mindset. I'm having trouble having control in my house. The king does the same thing, or Vashti does the same thing to the king that my wife probably does to me. So how can we solve both of our problems? Let's make a decree that anybody that does this is wrong. So that solves your problem, and that solves my problem, and that solves every man's problem who has the same control mindset that we got. We're geniuses, fellas. Hey, that was a hard one. That was a hard one, fellas. We got it though. Come on now. They thought they had us. What the? We're the. What are you talking about? We're the princes. We're the kings. We got this. Verse 17. For all the queen's behavior will be known to all the women, so that they will not despise their husbands in their eyes when they report. King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be come in, but she didn't come in. This very day, the noble ladies, so our wives, the noble ladies of Persia and Media, what will they say? They'll say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen, and thus there will be excessive contempt. And look, guys, if we don't fix this, right, if we don't do anything, our control is lost. So what did we say before? You see how this is all wrapping? What did we say before? When you are scared of something, when you are scared of losing control, when you can't manipulate the situation, when you can't manipulate a person's feelings and emotions and do what they want you to do at the time you want them to do it, you have to overcompensate. That's the only way you get what you want. So what does that mean? That means I fight my brother. That means I hate them. That means I don't like them. That means I don't talk to them. Why? Because that's the only form of control that I have. That's the only form. There's nothing else I can do. Why? Because I know I've gotten to a point where I can't control this. There's nothing I can do. So now, guys, we can't control this. So what we have to do to our wives, we have to make a rule that makes it so hard for them to live, that we have so much overwatch over them that now there's no way that they can get out of our control. Isn't that interesting? That's what we do too. The only way that we can fix this situation as church leaders, the only way we can fix the situation as a nation, the only way we can fix the situation in the home, the only way we can fix the situation is we have to make a rule that is so unbroachable, that gives us all of the control and overwatch, that nothing else can happen. We have to have ultimate control here. You see what we're fighting for? We're fighting for ultimate control when that's not ours. That is God's. And do you see why? Ultimately, what does this show me and what does this show you? We have families, we have churches, we have that are just scared. That's all it is. You're scared of something. Now, what you fear is different for everybody. Maybe you're so scared because you're scared of what other people are going to say. Maybe you're so scared because you're so scared of how other people are going to view you now. Whatever the case might be, you're scared of something. But the way that you show your fear is to have over excessive control. That's the only way you can control the situation. So what are they doing? Look, guys, this situation is going to go south. We have to make a rule that's undeniable. We have to gain our control back. Verse 19. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded. Watch this. Let it be recorded in the law. Notice, we're not going to make this a suggestion. This is going to be national law now. Let it be recorded in the law of the Persians and the Medes, so that it can't be altered. Isn't that interesting? Notice how they're changing the situation so that it can't be altered. That Vashti shall come no more before the king, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. Think about how much control that shows. So much pride, and it shows so much fear that you have. And I want to mention this before we go on. Guys, when we deal with people, sometimes you won't understand why other people don't like you. Sometimes you'll be kind. You will show gestures of kindness. Sometimes you will have the heart that Jesus said to have. You will be kind. You will be meek. You will try to do, and maybe you've learned these things over the years. But sometimes, guys, with some people, as hard as it is, you can't take it personally why they don't like you. This is their form of control. they're scared and they don't know how to respond. And the only way that they can respond to the situation is to hate you. That's the only way. And now, is that wrong? There's no doubt it's wrong. But if we're trying to understand people, this is what it is. And this is how it is. So now, as much as lies in you, right? As Peter mentioned, as much as lies in you, you continue to do what you need to do. I can't control somebody else's heart. I can't control somebody else's fear. I can't control somebody else trying to have ultimate control over everything all the time. I can't control that. But what I can control is as much as lies in you. I can control that, right? Very, very interesting. Verse 20. When the king's decree, which he will make, is proclaimed throughout all the empire, for it is great. So now they think, man, we could just blanket this. This is going to help all the guys. The reply pleased the king, and it pleased the princes, and the king did according to the word of who? Mamukin. You know what the downfall of some guys is? They listen to another guy and they don't know the other guy's motivation, but it sounds good, so then they just do it. Brother, you need to do this. Why? Well, brother so and so said it, so I'm just going to do it. So then next thing you know, I just do it because he said it. I'm going to say this very slowly too, because I don't want you to take this wrong or run with it. There's a lot of people that I respect, but I'm just not going to do something just because I respect you. I'm going to check you. Is this right? Oh, yeah, he's right. And I would want you to do that for me. Is Jordan right on this? Hey, Jordan, you might want to check this again. Oh, yeah, you're right. My bad. Yeah, let's look at what God says. That's what men do. God, let me rephrase that. That's what godly men do. I don't just do it just because you said it. You see, here's the thing. We always quote, well, these were more noble than those in Thessalonica. But then when someone actually tries to be noble and when someone actually questions us, what do? We're like this king. Why are you questioning me? Why don't you believe me? I've preached this multiple times. Don't you listen? You see what we're doing? What do we have? We got this control mindset. So if a brother or sister comes, I'm not seeing that from the scripture. Let's do it, not according to Jordan's word. Let's read again. I've already preached 8 sermons on it. I've got 80,000 videos on it. I've got all this on it. Why aren't you listening? Let's look at what God says again. Guess what? Godly leaders don't get tired of telling people what God said. But when godly leaders get frustrated and tired, when people have questions, what is that a sign of? Potentially that you want control. That's very sad. And that stuff creeps in. It creeps in within our hearts. And that's something that we don't need to have. So if we want people to be noble, if we want to be noble, let's actually do what it takes to be noble. That it means asking questions. It means asking questions. Now, keep going. Verse 22. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, so every language, and each people in their own language, that each, well, watch out. Now, notice how the text proves our point. So that each what? What does your Bible say? So that each man must be master. Now, this is different than Ephesians 5. Well, see, I got you, Jordan. Look, Ephesians 5, right? Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church. Wives, be submissive to your husbands. See, look, it matches. It's a different word. When you look at this, being a master, this is dictatorship. This is control here. And based off what we read up to this point, what is undeniable? What did Ahasuerus and what did every man from India to Ethiopia, what were they afraid to lose? Control. So do you think these guys wanted to be godly leaders and masters over their house? No, they wanted to be lords. That's different from Ephesians 5. So don't try to compare that. And if you try to compare that, that shows where your heart is. You may be one of these guys. Now notice what it says. That each man should be master in his own house. and speak in the language of its own people. And that's where we stop. That's where we stop. Now, what do we talk about in the beginning of this? God, are you in control? God, why are you letting a nation do this? Why are you just watching this? Why are you okay with this? It seems like your footprint, your hand is not in any of this at all. You're just letting this stuff it just keeps happening. God is in control. Maybe not in the way you want it. Maybe not in the way Ahasuerus wanted it. Maybe not in the way that the men from India to Ethiopia wanted it, but in a way that God's ways are higher than ours has it. So therefore, instead of you trying to ring people and make rules and have control over everything and everybody around us so we can be big brother and we can overwatch everything, why don't we give true control to God? Why are we afraid to do that? Because for so long, we've been making the rules. That's why we're afraid to give God ultimate control. Now, are there boundaries? Are there rules? Are there things we need to understand? Yes, let's not swing the pendulum. Let's not be children and discuss that. We understand that, so we're not even going to go there. But we understand what this text is saying. God is in control. We are not. You see how chapter 1, God is reminding us that I'm in control here? But you'll do what you want to do, and we'll see what happens when men do what they want to do and they think they're in control over God. Esther part 1. You see how there's so much detail? There's so much stuff in that. And again, please go back and listen to the prequel. If you haven't listened to the prequel, then this one won't make sense historically. So go back and let the prequel paint the picture, and then come to part 1. We'll be here, and then listen to this one and see how it matches. It's a beautiful thing. So I can't wait next week to get back. We're going to actually meet and get some history and some stuff into Esther and see how she fits in all this, and how God, as he's in control the way that he wants to be, how he's moving pieces and letting things happen. And God is just setting things up in ways that we can't see. I cannot wait to do that. So next week, we'll get into chapter 2. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Again, leave a comment. Reach out to us. We're here. You won't be the first. So we're thankful for you guys, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, guys.